Invitado por la Universidad Hebraica de México, el historiador Thomas Weber visita nuestro país. Weber es historiador y experto en historia contemporánea y relaciones internacionales. A lo largo de su carrera, ha sido profesor en institutos como Harvard y Princeton. Asimismo, ha publicado varios libros, lo que lo ha hecho acreedor a premios como el Golden Light o Infinity. Hoy, Thomas Weber, uno de los más importantes biógrafos de Adolfo Hitler, abre un espacio para recibir a Enlace Judío.
The question that actually has really most fascinated me in recent years is how Hitler became Hitler. It is, how is it possible that someone like Hitler can emerge in a kind of an advanced Western society? How can societies break down that they can make the rise of someone like Hitler possible? But also, how can this guy, this ordinary guy from the borderlands of Austria and Germany, turn into the man whom we all know? That's a question that has really fascinated me for the last few years, particularly since I think that we didn't really understand, or maybe still don't really understand, how Hitler could become Hitler, and also because I think we often are looking for the wrong kind of Hitlers. We're kind of misunderstanding Hitler, and therefore we're looking for the wrong warning signs for the new kind of Hitlers. And that's also why they kind of both in an intellectual sense, but also in terms of out of kind of political civic concern for the present, I really want to understand how Hitler could become Hitler. It's very difficult to answer who caused more death, whether it was Hitler or Stalin. I'm not even sure whether I know off the top of my head the exact body count. It is also, of course, when we do a body count, for instance, if we talk about the body count of the Second World War and the genocides associated with them, it's difficult to see who exactly we should, which numbers we should charge Hitler with, and which numbers we should charge Stalin with. The problem with Stalin is, of course, also what do you make of various famines in the Soviet Union? Were they deliberately generated by Stalin in order to kill those populations, or were they a result of mismanagement? And I think ultimately I also find the question of whether Hitler or Stalin killed 5 or 10 million more than the other is maybe not the central question. I think the central question is that they're both responsible for mass death on a previously unknown scale, and that they're not the same. They're also the killing processes are different, the ideologies are different, how this all comes about are different, and yet the results, I would say, are equally horrible on both sides. Yes, we can. It's absolutely clear that Hitler died in 1945. In a way, it was always clear. It was that Hitler died because the testimony of various people made clear that he could not have made it out of Germany. And also beyond that, if we even just look at the question of plausibility and probability, Hitler is not just the kind of character who would have wanted to escape Germany and then live somewhere a life of seclusion. It just doesn't make sense that someone like Hitler, with the kind of feeling of mission, with the kind of Nazism and so on, would then live by Walden Pond or somewhere in Argentina in seclusion. That just is out of character, and it's also out of character for someone who had harbored occasional suicidal thoughts throughout his adult life. that this person, when finally faced with the choice in 1945, would say, well, no, I really want to actually live and just live a life in seclusion. But beyond that, the recently French journalists and scholars have examined, or have been allowed to examine, teeth of Hitler that have been held in Russia since 1945, where for a long time they didn't really allow anyone to examine them. And they have been examined now, and it has been shown conclusively that these are really Hitler's teeth. And so this is, I think, as good as evidence as any. Obviously, there will always be conspiracy theorists who will not believe any of that. They will always say, well, but who knows whether the story about these teeth are really true? But these are. But I think then we get to then soon into the territory of the kind of conspiracy theorists who argue that man never made it to moon, that this was just done in the studios of Hollywood, or that no plane hit the Pentagon in 2001. What motivated me for so many years to study Adolf Hitler? Well, my engagement with Adolf Hitler started on one level almost by chance or coincidence. After writing a previous book, I was looking for a new topic, and I had explored various possibilities, and in part it was just that when talking with a friend and colleague of mine about possible projects, that we discussed that there really would be a way of re-examining the question of Hitler in the First World War at that time by looking at the men around Hitler's Hitler, by looking at the men of Hitler's regiment. I suddenly had a sense this would be a way to really genuinely shed new light on Adolf Hitler. And a lot of things followed from that, and a lot of questions that subsequently have sustained me were questions I would have at that point not really have kind of come up with. But I suppose there is still something, maybe also with me having grown up in Germany, that, and always been fascinated in history, that it is not that surprising that you then start to ask questions about how the world that you have grown up with, that you have experienced as a peaceful world of nice people and of generous people, could have been responsible for the deeds that Germany was responsible, not in the grand scheme of things, not so many years before I was born. And that was certainly something that always generated my interest. Also, I have now lived in outside of Germany for little more than half my life, is of course also there in seeing the kind of the world that the Second World War created, how people respond to Germany, to Germans, how to see the consequences of the Second World War. Maybe also, even though I don't think that's the main reason why I'm studying Hitler, the fact being married into a Jewish family who lost people in the Holocaust, all those kind of questions, I'm sure, are part of that kind of equation of why I've been interested in this character. And maybe also, and this maybe the final point of why I'm interested in Hitler, I think has a lot also to do with dealing with Hitler outside of Germany. I don't think that had I stayed in Germany, I would have written about Hitler, or at least not in this way. Hitler was also a figure that, I don't want to say taboo, I mean Hitler was always talked about in Germany, but there was also, for perfectly honorable reasons, since at least I guess the 1980s maybe onwards, an attempt to not focus too much on Hitler, in an attempt not to, just like after the Second World War, or when a lot of Germans were blaming everything on Hitler, But I think things by maybe the 1980s, 1990s had gone so far to the other extreme that Hitler became a person who everyone mentioned, but no one kind of took seriously. So Hitler was this kind of side figure who was no longer really quite taken seriously. And I think it is in that context that I then thought, hang on, this doesn't really make sense. I really want to kind of figure out what role Hitler played in this equation, not as an either or, but as how Hitler played a role in this equation. And I think that was something which in a way was much easier to do outside of Germany than inside of Germany. I find that quite often, particularly with my first book on Hitler, when I write about Hitler, give talks about Hitler, or in newspaper interviews and so on, people would frequently ask me, well, isn't there a danger of putting too much focus on Hitler, or the questions of that kind? And sure, they're perfectly legitimate questions, but strangely enough, when I give academic talks in Israel, in America, or anywhere else, I never get those kinds of questions, where I get, for instance, in Israel, I get kind of questions that are driven by kind of an intellectual interest and intellectual openness that I did not experience in Germany in that way. And I think that also has generated or sustained my interest in Hitler.